This episode is brought to you by Serpentes Infrastructure. If the traffic gridlock in your city has become unbearable, there is an option that has been demonstrated to solve it, 100% guaranteed. Serpentes Infrastructure. They've cut through the Gordian knot of urban density issues worldwide with their patented one weird fix: giant snakes. When you employ their engineers, they'll lay one of their massive serpentine kaijus onto your busiest street or blocked up bridge or tunnel. They'll install some plausible brick facades around the gaping maw, and hooray, your traffic has gone from congestion to digestion. And satisfied customers who have employed their rapacious reptiles have reported over time significant decreases in pollution and skyrocketing rents, and other quality of life headaches endemic to overcrowded metropoles. And while you're ordering, check out their other population management solutions, such as a daily carousel ritual, or apply to beta test their latest pilot product, Giant Holes. And thank you, Serpentes Infrastructure, for sponsoring the Rereading Wolf podcast. This episode is brought to you by the support of generous listeners just like you. You can learn how to be one of them at patreon.com/rereadingwolf. And thank you, listener patrons, for supporting the Rereading Wolf podcast.
Warning. The following discussion is deliberately riddled with spoilers and unhinged speculation on this nearly 40-year-old book, Gene Wolfe's The Book of the New Sun. You can't read a Gene Wolfe story. You can only reread a Gene Wolfe story.
Welcome to Rereading Wolf. We don't pretend that this is the first time you and we have read these books. We want to understand them in as much detail as possible, and that means considering the works as a whole.
Hi, I'm James Wynn.
And I'm Craig Brewer. Hello, James.
Hi, Craig.
Wow, that's more energetic than you were a second ago.
I turn on.
Imagine what happens when that little red light comes on.
It's showtime.
It's a busy time of year, this old Christmas time.
Yeah.
I've been too busy to plug it. I've been too behind on actually getting weird Christmas stuff out in order to plug it. So, so there's nothing to plug yet. Hopefully, maybe when people hear this, maybe the first one will be up, but we'll see.
Well, you know why I'm so excited, really. We have corrections.
Hey, you was wrong. You was wrong.
We haven't played that music in a while.
So on Reddit, Neil Smith says, good episode, as always. However, you mixed up some of the reader comments between Mike Farrar. And he should get credit for those. Yeah, it was Mike Farrar's Curiositas Earthis regarding the Hrodules being white-robed servants in Syriaca's tale, not Neil. And Mike didn't take any hard feelings, though. And he kindly directed us to his Reddit post on the subject from a year ago, Dreams and Dream Weapons. And you can search for it on Reddit or find the link in the show notes.
I have to say, I'm surprised we don't do that more often. And that does bring up the other thing that I want to say a very hearty thank you to a lot of the new master patrons who haven't been commenting a lot lately, because that means I don't have to go find all the various clips that we do have saved and we do have organized. But if we have ever forgotten someone and like used a comment and forgot to play your clip, just let us know. And we'll give you a special extra clip.
Yes, that's right. Right. We'll play it.
But so far, no. So it's always good. I always, as the number of those gets up there a little bit more, I always get nervous. I'm like, how are we going to keep it all straight?
Always a chance. Yeah. But
it's worked so far.
Yeah. Well, speaking of patrons, on the Patreon site, Stephen Hampshire says, on the subject of the saucer knots, it seems pretty clear to me that they are not like Merlin, living backwards. They live forwards, but can only travel backwards in time. It feels to me that they're working their way backwards to inflection points, fiddling with the timeline until they achieve a goal. That's kind of like Mantis's view of the whole idea.
And that sort of, just because my pet peeve about wanting to know how exactly detailed they're going back in, that one I like, because it then makes sense. Because otherwise I'm always like, but does that mean in this moment you're back there? And that just gets confusing. So I kind of like that because it does give a little more organization to it. But it also, to me, it makes them make a little bit more narrative sense. But But yeah, I still don't think we really know.
Yeah. Oh, so what do you think? Do you think they camp out for a while in a particular area? Do they, like Mana suggested that maybe they live there for years going forward
and back. I don't know. I still feel like with the way that the quarters of time are discussed, people move around strangely. And if you're able to get outside of it, like I would assume that if they're Yasadi, that they would be spending most of their time outside of Braya, like not necessarily hanging around here, but they would literally just be somewhere doing Yasadi things. And
you think they have other jobs? You don't think going back in time and doing all the things they do isn't a full-time job?
It seems like manipulating the actions of various potential multiverse candidates from the past to affect your own creation would require a lot of research. So it does seem like they'd have to spend a lot of time in those weird computerized catacombs on Yasad. But I don't know. I mean, I truly don't know. It does totally remind me, though. Okay, total segue. There is a wonderful, wonderful Canadian Christmas show that has 3 wise aliens who always make me think of these guys. It's called A Cosmic Christmas. And on the cover, if you just go Google it, you're going to see 3 like alien looking dudes. And one is actually kind of shorter and rounder, kind of like I always imagine Ospego. So anyway, yeah, Cosmic Christmas. Worth your time. It also features a duck.
Well, of course it does. On the other hand, you think about it, you got little Severian. He's visited by 3 wise Harajuls. There's talking beasts. His mother stands over him. His father has to take a kind of a bit of a back seat.
That's okay. That even after I said that, even though I made the joke, I don't know why I didn't make the connection to to the R3 and the wise men, but there could well be some of that.
Yeah. Okay. Having sex with your granny. I don't know that I can work that part in, but
you got to go non-canonical. Biblical Bible works for that. Maybe in probably not the Book of Thomas. You got to go really apocryphal.
Yeah, I'm sure it's there. Oh, and by the way, Stephen Hampshire has more to say. He says, as for why the claw and Severian doesn't heal Jolenta, well, maybe it does. Some. She is able to walk on her own shortly after. Perhaps she has become dependent on Talus's artificial gimmicks, and healing of her actually leaves her unable to function. Yeah, I guess you're saying something like that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wish there was more in the text that actually seemed to confirm that kind of idea, because I like it a lot. I think it's really cool. I just don't know that we really get much in there that would lead us to think that, yeah, she is sort of getting better, which makes her worse or something like that. But I like the idea a lot.
I do. Yeah. It would suggest that in healing her, he's eventually kills her, right? Because she doesn't want to be healed. I don't know.
Yeah.
Also, Stephen says, I'm not sure I agree that the miracles that Severian and the Claw perform are just movement in time, because I don't see that explaining the water into wine event. That's unless it's, urine into wine or something like that. But that is a good point. But nothing really explains the water in the wine event if you're going to try and figure out some sort of rational reason for why it happens.
Yeah.
On Twitter, Adrian Tchaikovsky says, the Conciliator as an animal with a human voice made me think of Oreb from Long Sun, though obviously not in Wolfe's mind at the time. Also, Baldander seeing Severian and everyone as animals in the prior scene. Animals compared to him, but, more enlightened nonetheless. Oh, yeah, talking animals, yeah. And he also suspects that maybe the Claw, just like Stephen, that the Claw did work on Jolenta, but it had begun undoing Talus's work onto her and accelerating her decline. And maybe Severian, he says, recognizes this and is alighting it from guilt.
That would be an explanation for why we don't really get much detail about that. It could be so, but there are so many other times when Severian's right that the Claw isn't working. I don't know. I should go reread again and see if I can find something, because it's definitely a speculation that seems like it should be right.
I think we're supposed to. Of course, he's still trying to figure it out in Earth of the New Sun.
Yeah,
right.
That's true.
And finally, on Reddit, Mantis, Michael Andre Durisi, says, regarding the Conciliator bit about taking a dying woman by one hand and a star by the other, yes, Severian brings up Holy Catherine in his next utterance. And yes, you all bring up Thecla and the other woman healed by the fickle claw. But hang on. I'd like a chance to look through the other end of this telescope. That's not the way you use a telescope, Mantis. Try the notion that everything in Severian's narrative is for an audience of one, Severian himself. The central pattern of repetition being the unspeakable, quote, you are going to kill dying Earth and youthful Ushus will rise up. The life forms are mere parasites, like a patient's intestinal flora intentionally wiped out after a regime of antibiotics. A little yogurt and it is all good. In fact, it is better than before. So the dying woman is Earth, not really a woman, and the star is a white fountain, not really a star. You know, that's pretty cold, Mantis. All the life forms are mere parasites. Oh, great. He also says, secondly, I'm not so sure this chapter marks Severian as being the Conciliator. Wow, okay. Wait a minute. He says, instead, I see it more strongly as being an untrained agent of the Conciliator, operating under the aegis of the Conciliator, such that the claw, working or not, shows the will of the Conciliator rather than the willpower or the psionic power of narrative Severian. Yeah. Well, that still fits. But he's managed a little thematic curly whirlies in there. But yeah, I wouldn't have put it that way. I would have put it more dry and narrative based. But he's got the actions and the theme all worked up together. He also says, related to that, I think the claw failing to work, an obvious miracle in this chapter, is especially powerful since Dorcas saw the miracle of the flying cathedral way back when he first drew the relic from his man purse. So she is the only other person on the planet with that memory. And then, with all the preloading, the dingus fails to even glow. Yeah, I think I hadn't thought of the fact that Dorcas is and Severian share kind of a secret about the claw.
Yeah, I do get that point. And that's, like I said, there's not really anything in the text to stand out as a clue that it actually was doing something. So I'm pretty sure this is the first big, it doesn't work kind of moment, right?
Right.
Yeah. So that's a good point to point out sort of the narrative contrast there. Yeah.
Right.
You keep the crooks and charlatans in business, babe. They do appreciate your patronage.
It is the season of giving, and we have new people who have been very giving to us and generous, and we just want to say thank you again to all of the patrons. Our new folk this week are new journeyman Joe Chalewa and Charles, just Charles. And we have one new master patron, Joaquim Berg.
I'm fresh about the Berg, the Berg, the Berg.
Thank you as always. Please check out patreon.com/rereadingwolf for all of the extra content that's up there right now. And don't forget that what we're doing right now is adding an extra Gene Wolfe story to the end of the Patreon version of this podcast on every regular episode. So you just go over to Patreon, set that up. And by the way, in the last episode or two where we did that, we did put the instructions if you're a patron and want to have those versions put into your feed. There are ways to do that with the RSS link. So please take a look over at the show notes for the last couple of Patreon episodes over there. Otherwise, thank you, everyone. Thank you for your generosity, and Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Festive Solstice, or whatever it is you do.
You know what I love stories about, Craig?
Things Gene Wolfe wrote.
Snakes.
Snakes.
And Dorcas knows every story about snakes that you've ever heard. Yeah.
Why did it have to be snakes? Chapter 27, Toward Thrax.
Okay, so here we are, still about 24 hours since Baldanders blew up the play. Talos and Baldanders have departed. It's Severian, Dorcas, and Jolenta, right? And we're still roughly 2.5 weeks since Severian was exiled, less than a month since the elevation ceremony. This is the fourth night since Severian and Jonas fled the Notchwolves, encountered Hathor and Buzak, and were arrested on the House Absolute grounds. They spent the night in the antechamber and were attacked by the Exultant Youths. And then the next night, Severian slept fitfully, and then he and Jonas escaped, and Jonas went through the mirrors. And the next day, Severian and Jolenta took their little cruise, and then the play, and Baldanders lost it. And Severian walked all night and slept all day, and then he ran into the troop again. Then they split. Talos and Baldanders are going to Lake Diaturna. Severian and the girls heading north, not strictly to Thrax. Severian is primarily looking for word of where the Pellarines are.
And the end of Claw is actually a little strange. There's a lot of short chapters.
We're rushing to the end really fast.
Yeah, I mean, just from in the Tor version that we have right now, there's only let's call it 25 pages left from where we are, but there's still 5 chapters. So the chapters do on average get a little bit shorter in this, and just I don't know if that necessarily means anything. It just does get more compressed too, that we have these sort of down chapters here. Right. Or well, this one, but then the next chapter is some crazy Abaya stuff or crazy Jolenta stuff. And then we get crazy, and then we get crazy witches and time travel stuff. There's a lot left in these compressed little chapters.
Yeah, well, the chapters are short, but like when we start getting into the Undyne and the witches, I think we're gonna spend a lot of time talking about those.
Mm-hmm. Oh, there's definitely lots to talk about. It does that Wolfe thing of, I mean, Kim Stanley Robinson called it the slingshot endings, where towards the end, all of a sudden you get all this super compressed action where a lot of stuff happens and it raises tons of questions.
Exactly. Well, think about how many chapters we've gone through now, just progressing, 4 days, less than 4 days.
Yeah. And we have the play, which is super dense, but then we're in the 3rd chapter of Severian just sort of still just moving around after the play with people splitting up,
exactly,
chatting and talking. So it's definitely not what you would consider normal pacing, is you're working up to, you would think the cliffhanger if you're going to finish the second novel of a 3 or 4 book series, but yeah, very different mood.
Yeah, it's got its own time. Yeah, there's no sense trying to predict how long everything is. I think someone had mentioned recently, I saw on social media that someone said, it's weird when you're reading a Wolfe book and you think, oh, I feel like I'm about halfway through. And then suddenly you're at the end and you realize, oh, no, the end was somewhere in the middle of the book. Yeah. So let's see, they're walking through a, quote, stricken forest. In the last chapter, Severian mentioned that the leaves of the trees were pale green and light-starved. And I suppose the sun is actually sinking, but had not yet completely done when they started. But they continue to walk for around an hour. That's a watch after it sets. And then they come to a little river. It's smaller than the Guile and it runs faster.
Yep. And it's also here, they're on the edge of 2 different types of landscape, I guess you could say. There's a forest on one side that they've just been in, and then he says they're coming to the edge of a field. So the river here is definitely kind of marking a boundary, which we're even going to, of course, get a totally different kind of walking experience a little bit with creatures and some other things that happen. And, but yeah, they're with the landscape here, he's already marking some kind of change that's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. And now let's suppose that I'm right, that the Guile is literally or elusively the Uruguay River, and they're going north to Thrax. And Thrax is, in my mind, short for cataracts. It's literally or elusively the Iguazu Falls, by some metrics, the largest waterfall complex in the world. So the river here could be the Rio Quarai, a smaller but significant river that branches off of the Uruguay. I've been unable to find the etymology of the names of that river, so it's hard for me to verify this. but they see fields of sugarcane on the other side of the river. And I don't guess it matters at this point. Jolenta, the Undine, we don't actually get her named in this entire book, and Jolenta is falling behind them at a distance, weeping bitterly, exhausted. So they decide they're just going to stop here. And here at the riverbank, they find good sticks for firewood. I don't think it was ever made clear, but apparently Severian had been using the steel that he got from Baudelaire to strike his flint to get fire. And only now does he realize he doesn't have that. And he left it with the autarch, about 36 hours ago. He now realizes this guy was the highly placed servant who paid Talos. Fortunately, Dorcas has a flint, steel, tinder among her scant baggage, among her all her things. I don't know when she bought these things or was given them. I didn't even realize she was carrying anything, but she is. And so they have a nice fire. It's a good thing that she is, super prepared. Dorcas does everything better. She should be the hero of this story. Jolenta is afraid of a bear or something that will get her out here. Remember, she's a city girl. And Severian explains that the soldiers would never allow dangerous wildlife to live in a forest so close to House Absolute, which I don't really think is true.
Yeah, it definitely feels like a sort of made up explanation to try and calm a child or somebody.
Right. I think it's just to keep Jolenta calm. And then they get, I guess it does a little bit. And then they get 3 thick branches and they put, just one end in the fire so that they can grab them if they need to, something like that to defend themselves. So let's see, no monsters showed up and the fire keeps away the mosquitoes. At no point in the impossibly distant future has mankind defeated the mosquitoes. So they all lie down and they watch the sparks fly into the air and they can see flyers passing overhead, arriving at and leaving the House Absolute. Apparently, when they take off and land, they generate these bright lights momentarily, like maybe like the blast engines.
And this isn't like watching the planes way high in the sky, because he talks about false dawn and how these things are incredibly light.
Yeah, they generate a false dawn. Yeah.
Yeah. So definitely, like, that to me makes me wonder, like, do they fly lower than what we think of as planes, or are they just huge and bright, and should we think of UFOs flying overhead and sort of lighting everything up? But yeah, definitely you go from that cool moment of like worrying about flint and steel, right, to flying technology going over. So it's just a cool sort of atmosphere moment too of what it's like to be in this world of the two extremes.
And for the cartographers out there making their maps as we talk, it's because he says it's a false dawn. I would assume that the House Absolute must be to their east. So Severian and Dorcas are thinking, looking down in their little fire. They figure the ministers and the generals wonder about them as much as they wonder about those fancy pants people. Who are those people? Where are they going? I think Severian and Dorcas flatter themselves to think that those people thought of them at all.
It is a moment, though, that I think is reflected. The same kind of thought comes up in Long Sun somewhere, isn't it? Where they're sitting there and looking at the lights on the other side, looking at the night and thinking, do they wonder about us the way we wonder about them?
And think about it. If you sit down, if you look at the stars, that actually makes a lot of sense. You can look at the stars and say, I wonder if there's someone up there looking at our stars and wondering about us somewhere on some other planet.
In fact, is there someplace else in here where Severian does that? Did we?
I think he does that in Earth of the New Sun. He's sitting there, and
is that Earth? Okay,
or maybe it's in Sword of Lictor where he thinks that he saw Hathor standing over him. Actually, I think that's the one. I think that's where it is. Yeah,
that scene where at first he's thinking about other stars,
right,
other planets, and then
he decides 2 of the stars are like his eyes or something like that. So, yeah. So, and then Dorcas sings, quote, a song about a girl who wanders through a grove in spring, lonely for her friends of the year before, which were the fallen leaves. If that's a folk song that we're supposed to recognize, it's lost on me, and I don't know of any theory that offers a suggestion. However, it does suggest Dorcas's own story, since here she is, a leaf, resurrected after winter, still spring, remember, and her friends are all gone.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was. I mean, it'd be cool if there was an actual old song, but it does seem so perfect for what Dorcas really is that we don't necessarily know yet. But just such a cool, dramatic irony.
Yeah, someone needs to write that song, though, so we can all sing it.
Certainly somebody out there listening wants to do.
Yeah.
That'd be a deep cut for Filk singing, though.
Yeah.
In the second volume,
just put it up there and say, "Hey, wait, that's not about science fiction. What are you doing?" And oh, yes, it is. Oh, yes, it is. So Jolenta is separate from them. She doesn't want to sleep near the woods where the boogabears might get her, and she's between the fire and the water. Dorcas and Severian are on the other side. Severian suggests that one of the reasons was that they wanted to be away from Jolenta, which is probably uncharitable. It's really because Dorcas doesn't like to be too close to the water. She compares the river to a worm, which, of course, a rotting body, and then to a, quote, a big ebony snake that is not hungry now, but knows where we are and will eat us by and by, like death, right?
So we know why Dorcas is afraid of water, but is there some connection there with Abaya being in the water as well? I mean, I'm just trying to think of sort of the symbols within the book that Dorcas has her personal fear of water, which we get, but is there something also connected to that fear of the sort of false resurrection with the Megatherians under the water? I'm just trying to think through the logic.
Yeah, well, there is a Megatherian minion,
right
in those waters, and we're going to get to that. She's actually, that kind of leads her to thinking about a Megatherian. That's
just trying to think about all the ways that you kind of turn. I mean, water is sort of traditionally a symbol of rebirth and renewal and resurrection in like tons of Western literature stuff. This is turning all that on its head. So which Dorcas, of course, is the obvious version of. But I suppose too, you could say that there's some kind of false sense of immortality with what Abaya promises, with the larger size and longer life and things like that. I suppose. I'm way overthinking this moment, but I'm just like,
well, that's what we do here.
Exactly.
Well done, sir. But it's interesting you bring up, false immortality. Snakes are traditionally a symbol of immortality because they shed their skin, and the idea is that they therefore live forever, and that comes up in Gilgamesh, right? Because the snake gets the fire, the flower of resurrection, of ever living life, lasting life. Well,
did you see that they actually found a new page of the Gilgamesh epic?
No.
I'll have to find that for you. Yeah, it's apparently not very dramatic and not too much happening. But,
it's like the Severian getting away from the play.
But portion. No, it was either a new stone with a few extra verses that they had never had before or something like that.
Cool.
Yeah, so pretty cool.
So anyway, that's a good point about snakes. She asks Severian, aren't you afraid of snakes, Severian? And we know that he's not, because he wasn't afraid at all of the snake that he encountered in the jungle garden. But that's mostly because he probably doesn't know much about, snakes and poisonous snakes. Certainly not giant constrictors. But Thecla definitely was afraid of snakes. And so Severian nods. Yeah, I'm afraid of snakes. And Dorcas offers some lore that she's heard. Even though she's been dead for 40 years, and it is from some already decaying part of the city well to the south of the citadel, she seems to always know more about the world than Severian does, having grown up in a cloister, right?
It's true. So Dorcas says, I've heard that in the hot forests of the north, the autarch of all serpents is
Ouroboros,
Ouroboros, the brother of Abaya, and that hunters who discover his burrow believe they have found a tunnel under the sea, and descending it, enter his mouth, and all unknowing climb down his throat, so that they are dead while they still believe themselves living. Though there are others who say that Ouroboros is only the great river there that flows to its own source, or the sea itself that devours its own beginnings.
Okay, so there's just a lot of possibilities here, Craig.
Mm-hmm.
The Ouroboros is a symbol that goes back to at least 3,000 to 5,000 years. The oldest instance of it was found in China on some pottery that was made by a Stone Age culture on the Yangtze River. The word is Greek for tail eater. And it makes sense that Dorcas wants to talk about Ouroboros because it's associated with death and resurrection. For Jung, the Ouroboros is, quote, a dramatic symbol for the integration and assimilation of the opposite, that is, the shadow. This feedback process is at the same time a symbol of immortality, since it is said of Ouroboros that he slays himself and brings himself to life, fertilizes himself, and gives birth to himself. For the alchemists, it was, among other things, a unity duality symbol like the yin yang symbol or death and the lady. For the Gnostics, it was a 12-part dragon that encircled the world. That is, sorry folks, the path of the sun going through the ecliptic, the zodiac. And for some Gnostics, they made a point of reversing everything. So for them, Ouroboros was the serpent in the Garden of Eden, the hero of the story who helped Adam and Eve defy the demiurge Jehovah and obtain the first gnosis, the first secret knowledge, by eating the fruit from the tree of knowledge. And elsewhere, it was the guardian of the tree of life, the keeper to immortality. Now, in the world of this novel, some people, where Dorcas lived in the south, said that Ouroboros is just a big river in the north that happens to somehow empty into its own source. I don't even know if that's actually possible. I can't think of an instance where that actually happens.
I guess if you had a big circular
big circular river
that maybe didn't came back
yeah,
to
that goes to the same place where it goes.
Point,
I don't think,
but
without a water wheel or something, I don't know how you could actually pull that off. Or maybe if you had like a geyser or something, it would push it into forget about it. I don't think it's going to happen. But I do think that there is, like in Plato, some talk about those kinds of rivers that go in a big circle. But anyway, the point is they say it's just a natural occurrence, which is something geographers often did in the ancient and medieval literature. And it is something the experts in wolf stories are inclined to do. It's just they just rationalize anything in myth. And then other people say that these legends are just a way of describing the ocean that surrounds Severian's continent and that people say encircles the world. And many people, I guess, have a flat Earth concept of their planet, right? Or maybe they don't have an understanding of continents other than their own, and they, just their own and the Eskians to the north. Mm-hmm. Finally, and this is the most interesting, obviously, there is the story that Ouroboros is a Megatherian, a brother of Abaya. Remember that per Jonas, the Megatherians are not just large, they are geologically big. When you're walking up a mountain, it's not easy to say, from the ground where you arrived at the base of the mountain and when you start climbing it. Yeah. So in this case, according to the story, people encounter Ouroboros and think they've just found a massive cave that goes into the water and under the water. And then she says they're literally devoured before they know it. And it's really hard for me to imagine that a being that large literally feeds on unwary travelers. I suppose that what they know is that people who enter never come back. Also, the Jurupari, remember that this is to the north, right? These are stories to the north. The Jurupari of South American mythology. Remember the Jurupari gets a mention in the whatever it is that Agia scrawled on the stone outside of Agilus's cell. But the Jurupari in some of the stories is actually mistaken for a cave.
So this is really cool because we've got all this immortality talk, and we would think that resurrection and immortality would be a good thing, but Dorcas is saying all of this stuff about it being terrifying, right? Like she brings it up as this is something that's horrific, and
anything having to do with snakes for her is scary.
Right. And it's not just personally bad for her. Like the legends that she's telling, if they are in fact real, those are also ways that Ouroboros is not such a good thing outside in this world too. Like but my point is that it's a cool moment where Wolfe is maybe talking about how there are maybe good and bad versions of resurrection and immortality. And Dorcas, I think, in some ways, is a bad version by just sort of coming back, but not necessarily really
She,
growing
in
herself.
a sense, she says she's still dead, right?
Yeah, she's still dead. So now what that actually means, like I said, theologically, or I don't know. I mean, it makes sense when we're talking about Earth and humanity as sort of like these grand cosmic forces, but is the idea then that personally, if you just want to live forever or even just want to get resurrected after you die, that's sort of a small thing, whereas what you really should be hoping for is improvement, or I don't know. I mean, it's hard to really trace that out, but what the good version might be is not just coming back again, not just being the same thing coming back again, which is kind of how she's, what I feel like Ouroboros here represents, is just the same thing in a circle that just gets repeated over and over again. Instead, think about the big thing of the play that I think we could all agree on, that there are like multiple births of humanity, and what you really want is a better one. Like you want to improve and evolve. I mean, the Green Man, the New Sun, all this stuff is about evolution. It's not just about starting humanity over, but it's actually about some kind of new birth that is higher and better, right?
A new creature.
A new thing. Yeah, that's the whole point of what the Asadis are trying to do, is help humanity get reborn as them, right? To be something bigger. But it's just for me at least, it clarifies, I feel, that Wolfe is very clearly here not just saying that resurrection itself is supposedly a good thing, but that in this book, in the cosmology of this book, there really is a sense that only evolution, only a sort of evolved repetition or evolved resurrection is really good. And that actually just coming back again, like Dorcas does, is actually kind of a tragedy. And if you're going to try and pull a theological lesson out of that, which I don't know if you really can or not, but it's suggesting that if there is simple resurrection after death, maybe that's not really good enough. That what real resurrection should be is actually a kind of purification or evolution kind of resurrection, where it's not just like you get rewarded to live forever, but actually resurrection is part of a bigger plan in which something larger might be going on. Now, I don't know. I mean, I think that in terms of what's happening with Earth in the long run, that's right. Whether or not you can easily apply that to very personal kinds of resurrection in the theology, or how that would mesh with Christian ideas, I'm not really sure. But I do think it's important that Wolfe, at least in this book, is definitely thinking about a kind of good immortality and a bad immortality. But I just wanted to mark it here as this is a place where I think it's really clear that Wolfe has sketched out two alternatives for immortality and resurrection. Good ways and bad ways.
That's a good one. That's pretty good. And, while Dorcas is talking about telling these stories about giant snakes, she's creeping closer and closer to Severian, like she's scaring herself. She's not planning to, what she ought to be doing is she can get really quiet. And then the snake was coming up to grab you, and then there he is. She doesn't know how to tell stories around a campfire for sure. But Severian puts his arm around her, and he knows, or at least believes, that she'd like to do it, even though Jolenta is just on the other side of the fire, and they can't be sure she's asleep. And when she shifts in her sleep, because of her full hips, narrow waist, and billowing hair, she tends to undulate like a serpent herself. I wonder if we're supposed to take. For me, I want to look for a hint of that. Is there some connection between Jolenta and the Megatherian? Obviously, I guess like the Undyne, she's a creature of Megatherian technology, right?
Maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, hard to say. Like if
like Juturna,
yeah, it could be. And if that's the same kind of stuff that Baldanders was using and Talus did it, I don't know, maybe, but definitely seems like it's not. I would put it this way, like thinking in terms of evolution, it's not something that actually sticks with you and that helps you grow. It's just a cosmetic thing that
right.
sort of has to be moment by moment maintained, and that seems to
Right.
be your
Well,
downfall.
it's ultimately death. It's not. It's if it's a trap, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So anyway, yeah, maybe there's a connection between Jolenta and Juturna. And if you're inclined to believe that Jahi in the play, whom Jolenta played, is Juturna, then this is a light confirmation for you. Or, I don't know. We'll see.
So the next line is weird because he says, Dorcas lifted her small, tragically clean face to mine, and I kissed her and felt her press herself to me, trembling with desire.
A tragically clean face.
Yeah, I'm lost. I don't know.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to talk about.
I'm trying to think like tragically clean because
she's been in the water, maybe
washed and in the water. Like, is that what he's referring to? It could well be.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because she does whisper, "I'm so cold." Yeah. Apparently, she's been quietly undressing during her storytelling without Severian realizing it. So we're going to get the sex scene here.
Severian says, when I put my cloak about her, her skin felt flushed, as my own was from the heat of the blaze. Her little hand slipped under my clothes, caressing me. So good, she said, so smooth. And then, though we'd coupled before, wouldn't I be too small, like a child?
Well, that's kind of dirty talk from Dorcas, right?
Yeah. And it also goes back to the whole, thing about hurting her. And that he had.
Right. I can't think of a metaphorical or plot hint in that statement. It's just dirty talk, right?
Yeah, and we had problems with that before, and it's just odd that it comes up again.
Yeah,
so I don't know.
No, it's filthy Dorcas. Yeah. and she has such a tragically clean face too. But you know what? It's not clunky prose here. I think Wolfe pulls off whatever it is he intends. So, but Severian just skips over the rest.
When I woke, the moon, it was almost beyond belief that it was the same moon that had guided me through the gardens of the House Absolute, had nearly been overtaken by the mounting horizon of the west. Its beryline light streamed down the river, giving to every ripple the black shadow of a wave.
Yeah. So again, we have the idiom of Severian's language that implies knowledge that Severian's own planet is moving, not the celestial objects, right? And the color beryline is a bluish green color. So blue-green. The moon is green. Yeah. And the word beryline just a gem, beryl, and it's bluish, suggesting the light of the claw. And Severian starts getting inexplicably antsy. He starts thinking, well, what if Jolenta is right? What if there are vicious predators in these woods? So he gets up and he checks on Dorcas and then Jolenta and adds more wood to the fire. He thinks about the noctuals. Jonas told him that they were usually sent at night. And then he thinks about the thing in the antechamber. And essentially he's thinking about Hathor, whether he knows it or not, even now. And flying overhead are what he calls night birds, owls, he says. They had those nesting in the tower of the spaceships at the Citadel, but also a kind of bird that he doesn't name. Birds marked by their round heads and short, broad, silent wings. And also birds of other kinds with 2 forked and 3 forked tails. Birds that stooped to skim the water and twittered as they flew. So let's see. I think these could be nighthawks, which are not hawks. They feed on insects and moths and such. Birds with forked tails. I don't know what birds have 3 forked tails, but for the 2 forked tails ones, he could be referring to scissor tail flycatchers, which Wolfe would have encountered in Texas. I don't know. We have at least one biologist in the audience. Maybe someone could take up a guess as to what these birds are in South America.
At the very least, what this does is very obviously recalls the Lake of the Birds, right? We're not a lake here. We may be on a river.
Oh, yeah. Excellent. That's really good.
But with all of Dorcas's concern and worry about water and her fear of the river as a snake, then to spend a whole paragraph here reminding you about birds on the water. I mean, I feel like this is just further emphasizing. Yeah.
Oh, that's good, because we're gonna have the Undying come up, and she's
Yeah.
gonna be coming from under the water. Oh, that's really good. Yeah.
And offering again a different kind of immortality or at least power or something like that comes up. Yeah. So that's what I felt like it was doing, just in a complicated way, with mentioning all these strange birds, but just seemed like it had to be doing that.
I like that. Sometimes Severian sees huge moths fly between the trees, wingspans as long as a man's arms. Not as long as a man's arm, as long as his arms spread out. And he says, quote, they spoke among themselves as men do, but in voices almost too high for hearing. That's wild.
Yeah. And hard to know too, if that's just a poetic way to talk about them.
Yeah. Tittering or
singing to themselves or
yeah. But he's, obviously it doesn't just sound like a bird singing to him.
Yeah.
It sounds like whispering, right? I wonder if they spoke a language. So, so like the rats in Alton's library really had their own writing. Yeah. If the rats in the library were a metaphor, then this could be a metaphor. If that was actual, then this could be actual or not. I presume these are not blood bats. So Severian does Severian stuff. He pokes at the fire. He checks on his sword. He stares at Dorcas in her sleep. Quote, looked for a time on Dorcas's innocent face with its great tender eyelashes closed in sleep. Creepy Severian. Yeah. And then he lays down and watches birds, quote, voyage among the constellations. Yeah. Naturally, this makes me think that perhaps those birds flying at night are actually constellations, and that would be cool, but I can't think of any candidates for night birds other than the Noctua constellation, Little Owl. Yeah. And then, he's Severian. He lays back and remembers. Quote, enter that world of memory that no matter how sweet or how bitter it may be is never wholly close to me. And he thinks about his elevation celebration, but he calls it, quote, that celebration of Holy Catherine's Day that fell the year after I became captain of the apprentices. Yeah, he's just gets around to remembering every detail of the preparations of the feast when he gets all these other memories. Actually, it sounds like he starts to half dream, but Severian says it's a memory, just free associating.
And he says, in our kitchen, I lifted a cup of stolen wine to my lips and found it had become a breast running with warm milk. It was my mother's breast then, and I could hardly contain my elation, which might have wiped the memory away, at having reached back at last to her after so many fruitless attempts. My arm sought to clasp her, and I would, if only I could, have lifted my eyes to look into her face. My mother, certainly, for the children the torturers take no breasts.
Yeah, so Severian said before that when the torturers receive a pregnant client, they open her. And if this is a real memory, then Severian was not born by cesarean section.
Yeah.
Ironically. Yeah, he was born and his mother was allowed to live long enough to nurse him. And we get other details. Severian can see that he is being nursed in a metal cell. He offers ways that she might die, but this is apparently all speculation. He says, soon she would be led away to scream in the apparatus or gasp in Alwyn's necklace. Remember, the apparatus writes the victim's crimes on their flesh or whatever. And Alwyn's necklace just chokes you to death slowly. And soon the memory, quote, faded even as I tried to bind her to me, dissolving as a mist does when the wind rises.
It's weird. I wanted at first to think that was a Thecla memory that he just got wrong and couldn't remember, but he does have the grayness that he assumes is the metal of the cell door. So yeah, hard to say. I mean, he does talk about being Thecla again in just a second, right? And then he has a memory that switches over to Thecla. But yeah, I don't know. At the very least, here in this moment, he's got a new memory of who he thinks is his mom, while he's just been with Dorcas, right?
Right.
Who is his grandmother, but has also been doing all this thinking about death and immortality and sort of bad resurrection and something about that versus his
Yeah.
mom.
And I think maybe it might even be more. As a memory fades, it fades away the way Equaster Malrubius does at the end of Citadel of the Autarch, right? Like a mist. And then next, Severian seems to imply that he has the ability to mark the time of a memory, and then he can come back to it at will. And I'll note again that Severian never seems to have done that with any of the memories of the death of Malrubius. And okay, this is good. In Michael Andre Derisi's chapter guide of the Book of the New Sun, he suggests that the Feast of Holy Catherine dissolving into a memory of him feeding at his mother's breast could imply a connection between his mother and Holy Catherine. I think that's astute, which makes the next memory interesting as well. The next memory, he's a little girl again. Oops, this is Thekla's memory.
I stood in a magnificent chamber whose windows were mirrors that at once illuminated and reflected. Around me were beautiful women twice my height or more, in various stages of undress. The air was thick with scent. I was searching for someone, but as I looked at the painted faces of the tall women, lovely and indeed perfect, I began to doubt if I should know her. Tears rolled down my cheeks. 3 women ran to me, and I stared from one to another. As I did, their eyes narrowed to points of light, and a heart-shaped patch beside the lips of the nearest spread web-fingered wing.
Severian.
All right, so that's a strange memory,
Mhm.
right? Like, is this something Thekla
I think
actually saw?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know. He seems
But
to think
we're also here in a room with mirrors with mirrors that both illuminated and reflected, right?
Yeah,
We've
they're
got
special.
these
They're
women.
special memory mirrors, and not just like our mirrors. But
Yep. And then it seems like these tall women around her were painted, but also painted to the point of being perfect, which makes it sound almost a little bit more like masks. Could be. So, I don't know. Like what is being here? Like, it did seem like a moment to me that was suggesting something about the Hyruduls, that you've got, these 3 women who ran up to her. And then that odd thing of the heart-shaped patch beside the lips of the nearest spread web-fingered wings, which is wild, is a little bit angel-like, maybe, as it could be a mask coming off to show horrible things. It's just, we never know. We don't get it.
Well, think about it. Who's going to show up here next? The Undying. So it's like you have these women surrounding Thekla. Are they family? I don't know. But he mentions that a heart-shaped patch on the lips of one of the women spread web-fingered wings, and that's the Undying, right? She's got all these changes to allow her to live in the water. And then he's awakened by someone. But before we follow that, I want to address something. Severian thinks first about the Feast of Holy Catherine, which leads him to think about nursing from his mother. And then he thinks about Thekla. And if this suggests Holy Catherine and his mother are connected, doesn't the next memory, of course, suggest his mother and Thekla are connected, maybe? And of course, and who are these women? One of the women are maybe seems to imply the Undying. So he's looking for someone in this memory, someone among these other women. And the woman he's looking for, Severian at least, is his mother. So I want to mention something Gene Wolfe said in an interview in 1983, Thrust magazine, spring edition. This is the spring after the last volume of the Book of the New Sun came out. Wolfe has been asked to describe Severian, which he does physically and in detail. And then he says, subconsciously, he has been further marked by his loss of his mother in infancy. He has difficulty in forming relationships because of that, although he does sometimes form them, and he tends toward strong erotic attachments to women who subconsciously suggest the mother he lost. On the simplest level, this means toward women who are physically larger than he is. Thea, Thecla, the Undyne, and to Jolenta, who has unusually large breasts. Of course, everyone is attracted to Jolenta, or at least nearly everyone. On a more subtle level, he is attracted to women who act as guides, Agia, or counselors, Dorcas. So, this is a confirmation that Severian is indeed looking for his mother in all of these relationships.
Yeah, and I think that is a good confirmation, because I think it's most people probably recognize that in some way or another. I mean, we do have the giant woman who sort of pulls him up out of the water at the beginning. I mean, if nothing else, that seems like a sort of weird way to remember birth too, the sort of the way that something about that very first chapter comes in. But yeah, so the lost mother, and the one that he's kind of looking for in all kinds of different ways. We'd have to, I still want to know more about what does that mean that for Severian overall, and does that have anything to do with his being worthy of the new son? Is that, like, I don't know, but I do. Oh, and you should be happy too that he did specifically mention Thea there, right?
I am incredibly happy at that. Yeah.
Like, yes. Yeah. That not just Thecla and not just the Undyne, but Thea too. But yeah. And I do like the fact that Wolfe was very aware of that, and was sort of intentionally putting that in there. So it does make me wonder then, like, Syriaca and the woman in The Other Soldier.
Well, Syriaca specifically says, "I'm old enough to be your mother."
Oh, that's true. That is true. Yep.
I don't know about Daria. Daria is another, although she acts as a guide or a counselor, right?
Sort of helps him out when he gets there. Yeah. So, but no, but it definitely is something that I think Wolfe intentionally wanted for Severian to have. And Wolfe also has plenty of other characters who kind of do the same thing. So, yeah. So what do we make of it though? In the larger,
I don't know what to make of it. Yeah, you know what? I am going to make something of it, but I don't know. Am I going to get to it to this episode? I don't know. I think I'm building towards something here, Craig. I'm building for something. You don't build a Jenga unless you got to build a base there, or else everything will come tumbling down. But so at this point, someone wakes Severian up, and he says he's, quote, uncertain of the point at which memory had become dream. So he's thinking sort of like a memory. He's kind of half memory and half dreaming. And he's kind of dreaming about his mother. And guess what happens? He gets waken up from this dream from the Undyne.
He describes her voice. He says, this voice was sweet, yet very deep. And though I was conscious of having heard it before, I couldn't at once recall where. So immediately, weird memory. That's weird. The moon was nearly behind the western horizon now, and our fire was dying a second death. Dorcas had thrown aside her ragged bedding so that she slept with her sprite's body exposed to the night air. Seeing her thus, her pale skin rendered more pale still by the waning moonlight, save where the glow of the embers flushed it with red, I felt such desire as I've never known. Not when I had clasped Agia to me on the Adamnian steps, not when I had first seen Jolenta on Dr. Talus's stage, not even on the innumerable occasions when I had hastened to Thecla in her cell. Yet it wasn't Dorcas I desired. I had enjoyed her only a short time ago, and though I fully believed she loved me, I could not be certain she would have given herself so readily if she had not more than suspected I had entered Jolenta on the afternoon before the play, and if she had not believed Jolenta to be watching us across the fire.
So that's an interesting psychological ballet that Severian is entertaining in Dorcas's mind.
Yeah, and whether he's right or not, it's a moment where Severian is all kind of distancing himself. Like, he's talking about how much he desired her, but he's also doing this weird sort of self-reflection of motives.
I'm just feeling desire. I'm not desiring anyone, although he does kind of break off into the psychology of why they were having sex.
Yeah. And so he keeps going. He says, nor did I desire Jolenta, who lay upon her side and snored. Instead, I wanted them both, and Thecla, and the nameless Meretrix who had feigned to be Thecla in the House Azure, and her friend who had taken the part of Thea, the woman I had seen on the stair in the House Absolute.
Yeah, a meretrix is a prostitute. It's Latin for, quote, the one who makes a living. In the 70s and 80s, a trendy euphemism for a prostitute was a working girl. So it's the same concept. In Rome, a meretrix was a high-class prostitute, someone who could afford to obtain a license and pay taxes.
Oh, cool. So that would fit, right? If she has a brothel, then I guess she's higher. Yeah. So he keeps going. And Agia, Valeria, Morwenna, and 1,000 more. I recalled the witches, their madness, and their wild dancing in the old court on nights of rain. The cool, virginal beauty of the red-robed Pellerines.
Yeah, he's just crazy for women at this point, right? He's just feeling kind of a disassociated desire. He's just ramped up, just desire looking for a focus.
And if he is sort of now collapsing all these women into some sort of desire that he has, it fits that it's all kind of like his absent mother, right? Like there's just some thing that's pushing him forward.
I think that's very perceptive, because there's a lot of theorizing that perhaps the Undyne is using some sort of spell to make him crazy with desire. But when he's actually talking to her, you don't get that, right? It's kind of waning after he wakes up. He's kind of he doesn't talk about that so much. In fact, he's not like zombified with desire for the Undyne. It's when he wakes up after dreaming about his mother that he's just really, he's rock hard.
Yeah. But I'm trying to just thinking about, like, for Wolfe to specifically pull out the missing mother, like, is there something that made Severian a better person for desiring his mother, or, you know, for needing that, or for going on a quest to partly at least find his mother? Yeah. I don't know. I mean, here it's
kind of a Mary thing, right? Like a Mary and child. So if he's a Christ figure, then you need a Virgin Mary, right?
It could be that. It could very well be that.
It could be. It certainly says that, explains all of these relationships that he's having, that he is in every one of them, he's seeing his mother, and perhaps he is seeing his mother in more ways than just metaphorically, but in his mind, that's what he is seeking.
Yeah.
And that kind of is a window into Wolfe's intent in this. Remember, his own mother was a big influence on himself, apparently. And so in one sense, perhaps this book is a love letter to his mother.
It's a weird love letter, but
yeah.
I do know lots of people have ideas about Wolfe and mothers, though. There's been in the past lots of talk on that, and especially on the Facebook group.
Well, it's very Freudian. I mean, he's deliberately dipping into Freudian psychology here.
Oh yeah. Yep. So let's see. So
Severian is just full of desire, like I said, but he's not a fool. Well, this time, and he does grab his sword. So
being filled with desire and grabbing your sword. Yeah, I guess there's something. Yeah.
But if he could have, he would have preferred to just pretended that he knew where the voice was all along. But he whispers, "Where are you?" Because he doesn't want the voice to know that he doesn't know where they are, right? So he says, "Where are you?" And he doesn't hear anything. But a fish jumps out of the water, which is actually, we realize has something to do with the fact that there is something in the water, but there's just silence. And then again, he hears Severian, the sandbar.
However deep, it was a woman's voice, throbbing with passion, moist with need.
Yeah.
It's moist with being underwater, but I remember it, Agia, and did not sheathe my sword.
So Severian has learned that women can be dangerous. I don't think he thinks this is Agia, though.
No, but he just doesn't know, right?
Right. So
creepy voices in the middle of the night.
Yeah, and so he looks at the river and he sees something about 200 feet from the fire in the water. And the voice says, "Come to me, come, please. I cannot hear you where you stand." This is like a really creepy scene. right? You'd have ominous music going on if this was a movie or something. And Severian says, I didn't say anything. There's just silence. And Severian doesn't want to leave Dorcas and Jolenta unguarded. And the voice says, please, when the sun reaches the water, I must go. There is maybe no other chance. And so this is like something out of fairy lore or something, right?
Yeah. This is fairy tale sounding.
Yeah.
At this point. Yeah. Come to the water.
And when the sun comes up, I'll have to leave. Yeah. So this little river is wider at a sandbar, and it's like than anywhere else. A sandbar. It's like a pier that goes out into the middle of the water, and actually divides the river at one point. And he steps on the, quote, yellow sand of the sandbar, shoeless. The water is greenish. On his left, quote, the water gradually narrowed and deepened. To his right, there's a deep pool, 20 paces wide, from which water flowed swiftly yet smoothly. And Severian, he just stands there and says, I'm here. Where are you? Can you hear me now?
And then, as though the river itself were replying, 3 fish leaped at once, then leaped again, making a series of soft explosions on the surface. A moccasin.
That is to say, a water moccasin, right? A venomous water snake.
A moccasin, his brown back marked with linked rings of gold and black, glided up almost at my boot toes. Wasn't he barefoot?
Yeah, but he still referred. That's a good point. He is barefoot. He's shoeless. He says shoeless.
Yeah. My boot toes turned as if to menace the jumping fish and hissed, then entered the ford on the upper side of the bar and swam away in long undulations. Through the body, he had been as thick as my forearm.
Whoa, that's a big old snake.
Big snake.
Yeah, and the Undine says, do not fear. Look, see me. Know that I will not harm you.
Green though the water had been, it grew greener still. 1,000 jade tentacles writhed there, never breaking the surface. As I watched, too fascinated to be afraid, a disk of white 3 paces across appeared among them, rising slowly toward the surface. It wasn't until it was within a few spans of the ripples that I understood what it was, and then only because it opened eyes. A face looked through the water at me, the face of a woman who might have dandled baldanders like a toy. Her eyes were scarlet, and her mouth was bordered by full lips so darkly crimson, I'd not at first thought them lips at all. Behind them stood an army of pointed teeth. The green tendrils that framed her face were her floating hair.
And she says, I've come for you, Severian. You are not dreaming. and that's the end of this chapter. Great cliffhanger.
Yeah, so we do get more than just wandering around the forest.
Yeah, let's look at things. First of all, last time he's seen her, and that's probably where the most likely idea of where he's heard her voice would be, in the dream, right?
In the dream, or does she speak when he almost drowns? That's what I...
Oh, no, she doesn't talk.
Okay, I didn't think so. I was going to check real quick. Okay, so you're right.
But remember, before he encounters her, he's dreaming about his mother, right? Mm-hmm. So he's got a voice that's feminine, but it's deep. Well, that's pretty much exactly the way a woman's voice would sound to a little baby, right?
Yeah.
So, I don't know what to say, what to make of it at this point, but the connection between Severian's mother to the Undine, it's real. And so once again, if I'm still thinking about the play, and I am not, Mark's clause that he makes a lot of, that in reality, I am larger than all of you. I don't think that means nothing. I don't know what it means at this point, but if I could get like a connection between Juturna and Severian's mother and Agia, and then I would have Jahi all figured out, because, they'd all kind of go together in some weirdo way. But I can get any two of those to I can draw a connection. I can draw a connection between the Undyne and his mother. I can draw a connection between the Undyne and Agia, and I can actually come up with a story for that. I can come up with a story for Agia and his mother. Actually, I think that's stronger than people realize for a lot of reasons. But I can't do all three. I can't. It's kind of just everything just flies off in every direction when I do it that way.
One thing that strikes me about this is with all the sort of mother angle that we've had here in the play, the big thing with Jahi and Messiaen is sort of who's going to be the mother of the next round of humanity, right? It's all about what, like, whoever Messia mates with, that's going to determine the character of the next stage of humanity. It seems like that's, to me, that's sort of the, at least to me,
it does. I mean, the idea of the first man of Earth, I mean, that is an obvious sense. And he does call the Contessa daughter.
Yeah.
I mean, I've made stuff of that.
Yeah. But that's not something we've thought about in terms of like who Severian's going to choose. Like, it's not so much, it doesn't ever seem like anything about the new sun has quite so much to do with, who does Severian end up with? And we always talk about how Valeria is a bit of a strange bird, like why her? And it is mysterious no matter what when you read that about why her, and then he doesn't really have much to do with her when you get Earth of the New Sun. But I wonder if there is something about Severian's relationship to his mother, or what he eventually imagines about her, that will determine his course. I'm not sure. I'm just trying to put together some different ideas here, but yeah, I just hadn't thought before. I mean, with Jahi and with Messiaen, it really is kind of like a question of two different mothers who will treat their kids in different ways, or give them different traits, or raise them differently. I don't know. But that's a different angle on the play than I think we thought of before.
Well, okay, so let's talk about, she says, no, you're not dreaming. And of course, the last time, like I said, she's encountered a being like this person, it was in a dream in Baldander's bed. And remember, there was even then a pterosaur that told him, you dream, but were you to wake from your waking, I would be there. Yeah. Go on. And then Severian, he goes down and they talk about a sand garden, right? So we get Severian on the sand garden. He's shoeless, like when he gets the claw, right? Yep. There's a sand garden in the Botanic Gardens. He has kind of connection to that. He's waiting for a woman. Once again, the sand garden when he encounters a rose bush, and all these things seem connected. And I just can't say how.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that connection. This moment here very much is similar to that in both the sand garden and what happens at the end of Citadel with that moment with the rose bush. That's interesting. And waiting for a woman in this case, and okay.
Yeah. And then next, Wolfe says that Severian is attracted to women who are physically larger. Well, dude, this is like the perfect woman for him. And finally, like I said, I made a connection between Holy Catherine, Severian's mother, and Thecla, because they do bleed into one another in this memory dream. And Severian wakes up and he encounters the Undyne. And the Undyne is a perennial candidate for Severian's mother. And there's a good reason. And if Vegas took bets on this sort of thing, I'd put down some money that the Undyne is somehow Severian's mother, just like Thecla is in a way Severian's mother, I say. And Agia is somehow Severian's mother. Remember, Wolfe says that he's attracted to women who act as guides. But when Severian falls for her, she has not been a guide yet. He just claps eyes on her and he goes and he just kind of falls for her at that moment. So anyway, that's just the way this book is. I do think Severian's mother, the person from whose breast he fed, has died, but how can the Undyne also be Severian's mother? This story is just so complicated. At this time, At this time, I can think of only one theory that is universal, solves other issues as well, that's not just a one-off to solve one puzzle, and basically an explanation that integrates this illusion into the whole. And that is...
Curiositas Orthus.
my false Thecla theory, which you can find at the Patreon site with the other theories I've posted up there. Just like the first Severian Malrubius theory, my false Thecla theory says that the Exaltants are a line of clones. Each is born with a twin, and from those twins, they're chosen at random. The Exaltant and the Kybit are selected, and the Exaltant is wealthy and influential, and the Kybit has no rights as a person, like Erne Smith in A Borrowed Man. Severian's mother was a Kybit in this theory, and Thecla and false Thecla are the next generation of their line. Thea is Thecla's half-sister because they're both clones of separate lines from two actual sisters. So Thecla is, in a sense, Severian's mother and his sister. And here's where I bring in the Undyne. She's from the same clonal line. That's why, Thecla is going into this room full of women, and she's looking for someone. And then she encounters a woman who kind of suggests the Undyne. And so she's either an Exaltant or, and I like this one better, another runaway Kybit.
That's it. That's interesting. I mean, I think we always forget that this Undyne might be someone else, right? It doesn't mean that she's always been this way for hundreds of years. That the Undine could have been someone else.
Someone can move into the past. Someone we've actually met could move into the past and become the Undyne.
And so even though the name Juturna is what name she has in Earth, I'm curious, is there some other connection or some other meaning of Juturna?
Everyone kind of wants to do a connection to Diaturna, Lake Diaturna, and because the idea is that maybe they actually could theoretically be pronounced the same way, but that doesn't really get me anywhere.
Yeah, I don't know what off the top of my head. I don't know what to do with that either. Yeah, but no. So because this Undine is not a Bayat, right? This is not. This is just a bride. This is one of them, and she's been sent to follow.
And she's still trying to grow large enough to mate with a Bayat.
Yeah. Huh. Okay, interesting. So that opens up some different possibilities. Yeah, I have no conclusions for all of this right now, for myself. But the question of Severian's mother is getting a little more interesting, because before I think I'd always kind of thought of it as, oh, well, once you find out Dorcas is his grandmother, then all this other stuff, you got to figure out who his family is too. And he talks about Holy Catherine. But now I think I'm starting to see that as much more central to a lot of stuff about Severian, not just as a puzzle to solve, but why his mother and why all these mother figures are so important, and all the ways that, like you say, that these characters may be his mother in some sense. And where that line between literal and metaphorical is, I don't know. And maybe it's messy. It's not clear.
So definitely.
Interesting. Okay. I wasn't expecting to get all that out of this chapter, but that's pretty cool. Okay. All right. And yeah, I got to really think more about Severian and why his mother is so central to this story.
Yeah.
If it is. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but it definitely is. So you have to think about why, but there's no question that she is, right?
I want to go back to that dream too now and see the dinosaur as the pterosaur or whatever.
I can't actually get to what that means. If you were to wake up, I would be real.
And is that is it that voice that he says he's heard before, or is it his mother's voice?
He does hear them talking to him under the water, right? So that could be the voice, or it could be his mother's voice. I'm just saying. Anyway, well, that's what we got. Can you help? well, if you can, bring it to the Facebook group, to the subreddit, to Twitter, email, the Patreon site, the Master Slack channel. You can find out how to do all that on the show notes. Leave an Apple Podcast or Stitcher review. Tell your wolf-reading friends. And until we take up Severian's conversation with a giant undersea woman, may the Moria favor you.
Hi, Mom. Bye, Mom. In case you ever listen.
That is unlikely.
I walk the line to find, to see ahead, I look behind, and it's alright. Sometimes I climb messy stairs, never leading anywhere, but it's alright. From fractal to the galaxy, a revolution spiraling, and it's alright. Sooner or later, your luck will betray you, the tables will turn, and you learn the behavior, and it's alright. What is lost will be found as the serpent coils round and round. Now the future's the past in the grasp of a
Okay, now we're doing the parting. Is that right? We've already done.
Did we do parting already? Or is it toward Thrax that we're doing?
Did we do the? But I think we've already recorded. Did we do parting?
Wait, let me check. Did we? Or did we not? I thought we did 2 chapters.
Did we or did we not?
There it is. Yep. Yeah, because you gave me this one and the next one. So
Okay.
yeah, because I knew you'd been I know you're working ahead. So, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
So this is a short chapter, but yep.
Yes, it is. Yeah, mercifully.
Yep. That's all right. All right. Oh, are you there? Oh shoot, I lost you. Oh no.
Oh, you went away. I'm not hearing you. I hate to say this. Do you hear me? How would you say?
Oh, can you hear me?
You there?
Oh, there we are. Okay, hold
Okay.
on. I that was mine. My whole internet went away for a second. Let me hit stop and hold on. Crap. Of course, the minute I say that, it jumps out of my name. Hold on. Christmas.
Finished and put up there. I don't know if you're going to have time to get to it. If you do.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Otherwise, I can do it.
No, I'll get it. That I can definitely do, and I need that'll be a nice rote thing that I can do and have a concrete end to, unlike all the stuff at work right now, which is so.
Yeah. And let's see, on Twitter, Simpleton. Oh, wait. Hang on. Maybe not. Hold on.